All dear colleagues, I would like to now open the 8th meeting of the COP29, 8th meeting of the CMP19, and 8th meeting of the CMA6. As we continue with the national statements, I would like to remind representatives of the measures in place for effective time management, specifically the 3-minute time limit for national statements and 5 minutes for group statements during the high-level segment. Please remember that statements should be as concise as possible, as the full text will be made available on the UNFCCC website. Speaking slots for those not present in the plenary during their scheduled delivery time will be moved to the end of all statements within the same category. I would like to point out that an electronic device will be used to mark the 3-minute time allotted to national statement and 5 minutes for group statements. This session will conclude at 18 hours. Statements that have not been delivered by 18 will be moved to the session at 10 tomorrow, Wednesday, 20th of November. Dear colleagues, let us begin. It is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. Won-Sup Kim, Minister of Environment of the Republic of Korea. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to express my deepest gratitude to the Azerbaijan Presidency and the UNFCCC Secretariat for their leadership in successfully hosting COP29. Since peaking in 2018, Korea's national greenhouse gas emissions have steadily declined. We have promoted carbon-free energy sources such as renewables and nuclear power, improved industrial processes, and deployed more zero-emission vehicles. As a result, greenhouse gases emissions have fallen for 2 consecutive years, showing a 13.9% reduction from 2018 levels in 2023. Carbon-free energy is energy that has no carbon emissions throughout its production, storage, transportation, and utilization. The Carbon-Free Energy Alliance, CFA, which Korea announced in September 2023, is a movement to contribute a sufficient and effective carbon neutrality that respects each nation's national circumstance. So far, 10 countries are officially participating, and I invite all parties to join and share your interest in the CFA. Notably, our GDP has grown while greenhouse gas emissions have decreased, signalizing Korea's transition toward a low-carbon economy. The Korean Emissions Trading System, KETS, introduced in 2015, has significantly contributed to this progress. As next year, 10th anniversary of KETS, we plan to strengthen its market function and increase the share of auctioning to drive further greenhouse gas reductions. On the Carbon Neutrality Act enacted in 2021, Korea annually reviews progress toward our climate targets and integrates the carbon neutrality goal into the entire policymaking process. Building on the process made so far, Korea's 2035 NDC will be science-based, feasible, and cost-effective. Ministries and various experts are working on a draft, and once it's ready, we will conduct enough consultations with stakeholders, civil society, and Parliament before submission. In setting the NCQG, it is vital to foster the voluntary and collective participation of all parties in tackling the climate crisis. Although not an annexed to party under the Convention, Korea has expanded its voluntary contributions through various bilateral and multilateral collaborations. We are committed to further increasing these contributions, including Green ODA. Korea has running a training program on greenhouse gases jointly with the Secretariat since 2017. Building on this successful initiative, the Ministry has launched the Korea Climate Transparency Alliance at this COP. We plan to increase the dedicated budget by up to fourfold starting next year and offer a new comprehensive training package from inventory to green mitigation projection model and consultation on relevant laws and regulations. More countries and Korea will benefit mutually from our innovative programs. Excellencies, the global community has pursued cooperation in spirit of addressing climate change, even amidst the current uncertain geopolitical context. At COP29, let us move forward in solidarity for a green world. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And it is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. Eamon Ryan, Minister of the Environment, Climate and Communications of Ireland. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
In a world ravaged by war and destructive weather patterns, we need an agreement here in Baku to give hope for a peaceful future. June this year marked the 12th consecutive month that the global average temperature breached 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. We need to get renewed support for the Paris Agreement at COP this year. Giving up would be unforgivable, but success can help restore belief in multilateralism and restore confidence. The prize is not just to stop runaway climate change, but also to develop a new economy which delivers better sustainable development for all. We need to listen to our scientists. We need to listen to our partners in developing countries when they tell us what they need, and we need to see the whole world take seriously the consensus that was reached last year in Dubai on transitioning away from fossil fuels. Climate change is not something that happens in the future, somewhere over there. It's here right now, and it's already impacting on all our lives, in particular the lives of the most vulnerable in the poorest countries in the world who have the least responsibility for harmful emissions. Ireland is not immune to climate change. Our small island is becoming warmer and wetter. We see increased rainfall and flooding affecting our towns, villages and farmland. Marine heat waves threaten our biodiversity, and higher sea levels and increased coastal storms lead to further erosion of our coastlines. One of the most concerning impacts of climate change for us is the risk of the collapse of the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, which brings warmer waters to our high-latitude shores. If it was to weaken or to collapse, which scientists are now saying could be happening faster than expected, it would mean that our temperate climate would disappear and we would be faced with freezing temperatures affecting our agriculture, our food security and our entire way of life. So Ireland's plan and vision to address this is set out in our yearly climate action plans, which chart our course for a 51% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030 and going net zero by 2050. Our ship is starting to turn in the right direction. In 2023, we reduced national emissions by 6.8%, against the background of a rising population and a thriving economy, showing that it is possible to decouple emissions and economic growth. One does not come at the expense of the other. Increasingly, we will see that the adoption of sustainable solutions will be the key driver of economic stability and growth, with investment in green energy providing a cheap, secure and reliable source of power for our people. We recognise that developing country partners will need support to make this transition as well, to adapt and also to adapt to the impacts of climate change we're already seeing. At an earlier negotiation round in Baku last month, I heard a representative from the African Union make an impassioned plea. We don't want freebies, but we do want fairness. Access to quality, reliable and accessible finance needs to be ensured, especially for the least developed countries and the small island states. That's why in COP26 we committed $225 million in climate finance by 2025, more than doubling since 2020, and we will achieve that target on scheduling. We also want to see as much money as possible flowing to where it's needed the most, and other sources of finance are vital to do this. A mosaic of solutions, including private, philanthropic, domestic and innovative sources, will all be needed. Bringing climate action development together is at the heart of Ireland's and the European Union's position. The key to success in these negotiations will be building trust so we can deliver that fairness. This is the task that faces us this week. We have to come together to build trust, to ensure fairness and to make progress so that we can continue to build on the momentum we started last year. The stakes have never been so high, but I believe we can meet the climate challenge by working together, finding global solutions to a global problem, transforming the risks of today into the opportunities for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Tesfaye Gebreselassie Sebatu, Minister of Land, Water and Environment of Eritrea. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, honorable ministers, excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. Many decades have passed since the international community has put the life-threatening triple planetary crisis at the top of its agenda. And in search for effective solution to this crisis, it has been imperative to hold regular and extraordinary summits and meetings that involve heads of state and government, ministers, environmental scientists, negotiation experts, influential social activists, and world celebrities, as well as business and technology innovators. Subsequent to these events, numerous documents have been produced on solution recommendations as well as resolutions aiming at promoting global cooperation for coordinated efforts to save our planet. To this effect, calls and pledges were made to raise ambition on climate action, foster research and development, cooperate in transfer of science and technology, as well as to mobilize finance to assist disadvantaged countries in their effort to cope with impacts of climate change and overall environmental challenge. Nevertheless, so far the steps taken to slash emissions at the main sources remain below what's required to meet the objectives of Paris Agreement and much below what science recommends. Similarly, mobilization of climate finance is still critical. Particularly, finance badly needed for adaptation has not been heeded to properly. Now, again, we have gathered for COP29 in Baku, with fresh memories of the climate catastrophe that recently ravaged lives and livelihoods of thousands of people in many parts of the world. Record-breaking greenhouse concentration in the atmosphere and global high average temperature were also noted during this outgoing year. It's also worrying to learn that Global Climate Action Plan for 2025-2030 is anticipated to be more likely below the required target. All these are bad omens to reckon with what to expect in the near future. Under such daunting conditions, billions of people already impacted and rendered helpless by ever-worsening global climate crisis are left with no option but to hope against hope. Honorable President, as if this unsettling challenge were not enough, humanity's conscience and the very relevance of international law, as well as the UN as a supreme global body, and the principles it stands for have been put to test by ongoing conflicts that cause deaths and sufferings of tens of thousands of innocent people. For the sake of peace and humanity, security of the world, these callous acts must be immediately stopped with just and fair redress to those denied the right to live in peace and freedom. To come back to the main agenda put on the floor for COP29 to deliver on, let me say the obvious, unless it will be considered of me being repetitive. Up to now, the people most impacted by climate change are those who have least contributed to its advent. But these impacts are becoming all-embracing. In order to prevent global climate crisis from reaching tipping point, every party needs to play their respective role. First and foremost, the great greenhouse gas emitter countries have moral responsibility to reduce their emissions to net zero. Further delay and failure in realizing the long overdue target is tantamount to prescribing self-extinction. And that is something none of us wants and intends to happen. With clear understanding of this, my country, Eritrea, within its limited capacity, has been engaged forcefully in tackling the ominous impacts of climate change through nature-based generational programs that focus on enhancing climate resilience of our communities and restoration of our degraded environment. Eritrea has given special attention to environmental education and public awareness. This will enable the citizens to internalize the graveness of the climate change impacts and the indisputably fundamental need to live in harmony with nature. We are also working to finalize the NDC to be submitted by early next year. Mr. President, at this point in time, recovery of lost trust in international climate negotiation and agreement is critical to the success of the global fight against climate change and overall environment. My delegation therefore calls on all parties to uphold the fundamental tenets of the Convention and undertake their respective responsibilities thereof. Politicization of climate change and backsliding from commitments has to stop. It must be borne in mind also that raising new issues now and then at every COP, however good intent behind them may be, could be hindrance to deliver on the major defining issue. COP29 should therefore focus on major outstanding issues. The main greenhouse gas emitter country parties have to take the lead in implementing necessary measures toward a transparent and quantified greenhouse gas emission reduction and finance raising targets that could be decisive in securing a safe way out of this crisis. In conclusion, my statement, I express Eritrean delegation best wishes for COP29 in Baku to come up with deliberations that will impart its historical relevance in the whole global climate negotiation process. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. Habib Abid, Minister of Environment of Tunisia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum.
In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, President Ilham Aliyev, President of Azerbaijan, Secretary General of the UN, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to sincerely thank the Republic of Azerbaijan for their excellent organization and preparation for hosting the 29th session of COP. This moment represents an important opportunity for us to renew our collective commitments to our planet and the future of humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, more than 30 years have passed since the adoption of the UNFCCC, and still we can see the negative impacts of climate change increasing dangerously. We witness extreme weather events such as floods, droughts, and sea level rises. These challenges threaten the stability of countries and societies, particularly those that suffer economically and socially, which makes it even more necessary to take and adopt serious concerted action at all levels in order to reduce gas emissions. Ladies and gentlemen, Tunisia, that green land, although its greenhouse emissions are only 0.07% of the global emissions, we suffer from the negative impact of climate change. Climate change has affected our natural and agricultural resources, so much so that we are suffering from food and water insecurity, and this impacts our public health. Our country is facing low rainfall and rising temperatures. This directly affects our limited water resources and our agricultural sector. Our land resources, our water resources and agriculture are a vital nerve for our economy. In response to these challenges, we have developed comprehensive strategies to promote adaptation and mitigate climate change effects. We have launched a series of national projects aimed at promoting our renewable energy to reduce emissions and rehabilitate our environmentally affected areas. We are working on strengthening our local capabilities in the field of technological innovation related to clean energy. However, and in spite of these efforts at the national level, these efforts are linked to international solidarity, particularly when it comes to affording financing and advanced technology. Ladies and gentlemen, we call upon the international community to strengthen global efforts by focusing on various efforts in the field of transfer of technology to developing countries. We also call for collective efforts for climate fairness in order for the large industrialized countries be responsible for what they have done in terms of emissions. They should do that by presenting more financing. And at the end, I would like to renew my thanks and gratitude to His Excellency Ilham Aliyev, President of Azerbaijan, for his hospitality, and we reiterate our country's firm commitment to support international efforts. Thank you.
It is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. Simon Watts, Minister of Climate Change of New Zealand. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Well, tēnā koutou katoa, Mr. Presidencies, Excellencies and delegates. New Zealand and all nations represented here today are already dealing with the impacts of climate change. Our households, our businesses, our economies are bearing the costs of its effects. The choices that we make now will shape the severity of these impacts for generations to come. New Zealand is committed to meeting our climate targets and doing our part to reduce the impacts of climate change. New Zealand is proud of the work that we are doing with our partners, particularly in the Pacific, to support their climate priorities. New Zealand is pioneering innovative, high-trust approaches to climate finance, including through country-flexible finance, which provides funding directly to our partners so that they can make their own choices on how that funding is allocated. As we work to agree the new global climate finance goal, we must ensure that this delivers for small island developing states. New Zealand has announced a $20 million contribution to the Pacific Resilience Facility, a Pacific-owned, Pacific-led solution to building resilience. And today I am pleased to announce that New Zealand is also contributing a further $10 million to the Global Fund for responding to loss and damage. New Zealand wants this fund to deliver effective support to some of the most affected communities so that they can recover from climate impacts and build stronger, more resilient communities. Climate change presents a significant challenge for us all. While each country faces its own challenges and opportunities, we are all working towards the same goal, to create a sustainable, resilient future. The New Zealand Government has a climate strategy and plan which will meet our targets to reduce the impacts of climate change and prepare for its future effects. Clean, abundant and affordable energy is critical to New Zealand's prosperity. New Zealand already has 85% renewable energy electricity, and we plan to double that amount of renewable generation by 2050. New Zealand is taking action to further improve its world-leading sustainability of our agricultural production sector. New Zealand farmers are some of the most carbon-efficient producers in the world. Research and development to enable farmers to develop and deploy innovative agricultural mitigation solutions is happening right now in New Zealand. Pricing emissions is a powerful tool. The New Zealand Emissions Trading Scheme is the second oldest in the world and has the broadest sectorial coverage of any such scheme in the world. A year ago, the first global stocktake of the Paris Agreement issued us all a challenge. Parties, individually and collectively, have to work to do what is required, and so that we realise this promise to ensure prosperity and protect our people and societies. I am honoured that New Zealand and New Zealanders, iwi Māori, business and our civil society are meeting this challenge head-on with you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. Abdulaziz bin Turki Al Subay, Minister of Environment and Climate Change of Qatar. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
سعادة رئيس مؤتمر الأطراف 29 لاتفاقية الأمم المتحدة الإطارية بشأن تغير المناخ أصحاب
Your Excellency, President of this COP, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to present our gratitude to Azerbaijan for their excellent hosting, and I would like to thank the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC for his organizational effort. Climate change remains one of the most prominent challenges facing the world, particularly the developing world. That's why we call upon developed countries to fulfill their commitments, including the reformation of international financial systems and to build on what has been achieved in the previous COPs. Qatar places environmental protection and combating climate change at the top of their priorities. Our Qatar national vision for 2030 relies on this idea, and we have presented our report for 2021, and it is based on future plans to address climate change. The Ministry of Environment and Climate Change launched its 2024-2030 strategy that aims at achieving a sustainable and balanced environment with development and to enhance institutional as well as community cooperation. Our strategy focuses on reducing our greenhouse emissions by 25% by 2030, and we aim at promoting environmental awareness. As part of our national plans, we have launched the National Climate Change Action Plan, and it has scores of actions targeted at mitigating emissions and adapting to climate change effects. The plan is based on strict governance and that will enable the country to measure progress and future challenges until 2030. Qatar is boosting its investments in renewable energy, most notably the Qatar National Renewable Energy Strategy that aims at increasing clean energy to 30% of our energy mix by 2030. Qatar has also implemented major solar energy projects to reduce our carbon footprint, and we have a national program called Tarshid, and it promotes energy efficiency in various sectors. At the international level, we continue to supply clean energy to global markets through our highly efficient LNG, which is a reliable source of low-carbon energy. We have made significant progress in the electricity, water, infrastructure, and transport sectors. We have operated the Doha Metro and Lusail tram as part of our sustainable public transport system. More than 70% of our public transport bus fleet has been replaced by electric buses. We have been able to host the first carbon-neutral FIFA World Cup in 2022, and this shows that we are committed to sustainability at all levels. We have also we monitor air quality through an excellent national network. We stress the importance of international cooperation to address the climate crisis. We renew our commitment to the Paris Agreement, and we pledge to continue our active role to support international efforts to address challenges of climate change and to ensure a sustainable future for our future generations.
It is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. Chris Bowen, Minister for Climate Change and Energy of Australia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
I begin by reaffirming Australia's commitment to the inclusion of First Nations people in our climate change response and clean energy future. Friends, 2 years ago I told you Australia was back. Last year I told you about our progress towards our 2030 targets, which is going well. But this year I'm here to tell you how Australia is accelerating our transformation to lock in our place as an indispensable part of the global net zero economy. We know that implementation of the Paris Agreement is critical to unlock the economic opportunities of the greatest global transformation since the Industrial Revolution. The COP President is an important steward of this process, so I want to express my gratitude to President Mukhtar Babayev for his guidance to date. We look forward to working closely with him and his team to deliver a strong outcome. Friends, the Paris Agreement is working. Last year's global stocktake showed that we have come a long way, from the brink of catastrophic 4 degrees of warming before Paris to between 2 and 3 degrees now. We've come far, but not far enough. This year I returned to Fiji to meet with climate ministers from across the Pacific, where the impacts of climate change are a clear and present danger, not far away abstractions, where climate change is not seen as a subject for negotiation, but a matter of their very existence. This is a message that the world needs to hear and a reality the world needs to see. That's why we're bidding to host COP31 in partnership with our Pacific family, and we're grateful for the strong support our bid has received so far. Next year, when we bring forward our next NDCs, we must all strengthen efforts to deliver the highest possible ambition, to accelerate global climate action to keep 1.5 degrees alive, and to position our nations to harness the economic opportunities of the energy transition. In Australia, we believe that climate action makes economic sense at every level, from the household budget to the nation's economy. It makes sense for the family home with cheaper bills, powered by clean, renewable energy. It makes sense for businesses to harness the cheapest energy ever known. And it makes sense for Australia's economy, blessed with abundant renewable resources. And we're taking action to seize this opportunity. This year, we're committed to more than $20 billion in clean energy investments over a decade as part of our Future Made in Australia plan. This is the biggest investment in a generation to build new jobs and industries and position Australia to be that indispensable part of our global net zero transformation. Not only to decarbonise and grow our economy, but to help our friends and neighbours decarbonise and develop their economies too. Because we know that we must keep moving or the world will move past us. That's why we remain laser-focused on our efforts to transform our energy system to 82% renewables by 2030, supported by our capacity investment scheme, which will unlock 32 gigawatts of wind, solar and storage in support of this goal. We're also supporting accelerated climate action and emissions reduction in our region. We've strengthened our climate finance commitments and expect to deliver $3 billion between 2020 and 2025. And we're strengthening our support for addressing the impacts of climate change as well. Today I'm announcing that we'll be making further contributions to respond to loss and damage. Australia will become the 6th largest contributor to the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage with a $50 million contribution. This builds on our foundational $100 million contribution to the Pacific Resilience Facility, a Pacific-owned facility that will support locally led small-scale projects across the Blue Pacific continent that respond to loss and damage. Here in Baku, I'm looking forward to supporting the COP29 presidency, along with my Egyptian colleague, Minister Fouad, to facilitate the vital consultations on the new collective quantified goal. We hope that countries can come together here in Baku and deliver an ambitious NCQG. And of course, it's our ambition to bring the COP to the Indo-Pacific for the first time since 2007 through our bid to host COP31 in genuine partnership with the Pacific. We're ready to step up and do our bit in helping shepherding this global critical forum. Friends, I look forward to working closely with you all in coming days and into the future to accelerate our efforts to meet the Paris goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And it is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. Tore Anschus Sandvik, Minister of Climate and Environment of Norway. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, colleagues, 2024 has been a year of many extreme weather events. Temperature records have been beaten, and not in a good way. We need to do more to combat climate change, much more, on all tracks. I will in the following focus on 3 of them. First, we need nationally determined contributions that are aligned with 1.5. Every ton counts. We need deep, rapid and sustained emission reductions. We must come forward with our highest possible ambitions, and with the large economies leading. Norway will do our part. Our new NDC will be answered in our Climate Change Act, and our new 2035 target will be our contribution to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees. Secondly, we need more climate finance. The new collective goal on climate finance needs to be ambitious and achievable and lead to more support of climate action in developing countries. Norway will continue to mobilise a high level of support to achieve the long-term targets from Paris. Our collective goal should also send strong signals to mobilise investments from the private sector. Thirdly, we must implement. The first global stocktake set up a roadmap for our actions. Taking action also becomes less costly each year. We need to mobilise much more financial resources to developing countries. We can and must implement climate action while promoting and respecting human rights, gender balance, indigenous peoples' rights and knowledge. And while listening to the echo from the future, our children and the youth, they are the ones that will live with the consequences. This COP needs to send a strong signal to millions of decision makers that we as parties will work to succeed in tackling climate change, to keep global warming below 1.5 and achieve a climate resilient future. The vision of a better future is a better future, the first steps on the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And now it is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Yoko Alender, Minister of Climate of Estonia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to express our sincere appreciation to all who have been involved in the preparation of the COP29. We live in an era of intersecting crises, with climate change at the forefront. Delays only amplify its impacts, as stronger heat waves, floods and wildfires underscore the toll on communities, economies and nature. We must raise our ambition and act decisively, with urgency that truly reflects the scale of the challenge. Climate action is both a responsibility and an opportunity to drive innovation, build resilience, and secure a thriving planet for future generations. The worldwide shift towards a clean, fossil fuel-free economy must continue while restoring and protecting nature. It is crucial to keep expanding the global proportion of renewable energy and advancing low-emission technologies, and jointly commit to bending the curve of biodiversity loss. With a fair and inclusive approach, we can achieve a sustainable future that benefits everyone. Estonia is making significant progress in transitioning from oil shale energy. Despite our small size, we are proud to be among the top 4 EU countries in terms of the share of renewable energy in our energy mix. By 2030, Estonia aims to generate as much renewable electricity as our country consumes. This reflects our commitment to a clean, sustainable future. The importance of joint action and solidarity in co-creating solutions for those most vulnerable to the adverse impacts of climate change is clear. I would like to emphasize the EU and its member states are the biggest contributors to climate finance, also to adaptation, with a particular focus on vulnerable countries. We are and remain a stable partner in a dynamic world. We must keep in mind the countries whose environment and economies have been severely impacted by war. We must support them in moving towards their climate goals, even though the responsibility for war-related climate impacts should rest with the aggressor. We, as a global community, have an essential role to play. We emphasize the need to increase our contributions to the restoration of Ukraine's valuable and unique environment, ensuring that the Ukrainians feel continuous support and solidarity of their international partners and friends. Solutions to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions are already within our reach. Let us put them to use. The future of our children depends on it. Only together we have the power to create a sustainable world for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Joelle Trizia-Clarke, Minister of Sustainable Development, Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment of St. Kitts and Nevis. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, I greet you warmly on behalf of the Prime Minister and people of St. Kitts and Nevis. The Caribbean and Latin America observed nearly 40,000 climate-related deaths and 1.3 trillion in economic loss in the past decade. Islanders live the horrors and hopes as frontliners on the climate crisis. The receding wave claims our land. The fisher's net has no haul. The farmer's hoe breaks no ground. The pouring rain knows no end. But there is hope here in Baku, for this cannot be the future to which we resign island nations. In 2023, SIDS received $1.4 billion, or 10% of GCF finance. In 2022, we accessed 44% of climate finance as debt. SIDS received 0.2% of global climate adaptation finance. Where is the solidarity? Where is the justice? Baku must be synonymous with relief and results for SIDS. The people of St. Kitts and Nevis stand with CARICOM and AOSIS in seeking a shift in climate finance towards minimum allocation floors, high-quality, sustainable, blended finance with the highest level of concessionality. A new collective quantified goal that bridges the financing gaps between G7 and G77. A loss and damage fund that is fully operationalized and ready for programming. Advancing climate transparency and accountability toward climate justice. Adequately resourcing the Special Climate Change Fund and other facilities which allow the NDCs to meet the 1.5 goal. St. Kitts and Nevis is actively pursuing its sustainable island state agenda through robust partnerships and targeted action in decarbonizing energy generation, constructing sustainable homes, and climate-proofing our utilities infrastructure. Our friends, an island nation, also at the vanguard of sustainability and resilience, offers us opportunities to learn and collaborate. As we leave no one behind, we must bring along the experiences and expertise of the people of the Republic of China and Taiwan. We must align our actions and ambitions so that substance and survival for all, not some, supersedes exclusionary processes. We invite all island nations to convene in St. Kitts and Nevis as we co-host the Global Sustainable Island Summit with Island Innovation to advance the SIDS agenda together. Our children, our elderly, our women, our girls, our indigenous people, our youth deserve better. Let us be seized by a desire for better, not seduced by incrementalism. Let Baku be the space for co-creation of finance justice in true solidarity. Children should not be inheritors of a ruined planet, but co-creators and co-managers of the future they deserve. St. Kitts and Nevis, CARICOM Youth Ambassador 2024. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. So it is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. Armando Rodriguez Batista, Minister of Science, Technology and Environment of Cuba. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is no doubt that climate change is not a future risk, but a real and present danger for many people in the world, especially for small developing island states. Our country, Cuba, has suffered in recent days the impact of two extreme climate events, Oscar and Rafael hurricanes, which have put pressure on the lives of our citizens. Despite the efforts of the revolutionary government and the acknowledged work of the national civil defence system, we have received expressions of solidarity from kindred countries, but loss and damages will amount to millions of dollars, and we will respond with awareness, science, innovation, despite the fact that we find ourselves in a situation in which there is an upsurge of the blockade imposed by the US, which hampers our development. Madam Chairperson, every year we agree to meet here to face the most pressing threat to the survival of our species, and every year we pay lip service to the emergency, but we continue to accumulate loss and damage and historic risks, and global temperatures break records and the sea levels rise. In these conditions, the contribution of COP29 is crucial. We need to understand that to strengthen climate ambition, our countries need to have access to necessary implementation means in adequate circumstances. If we do not have a predictable flow of resources, all appeals for mitigation and resilience, appeals by developing countries, run the risk of becoming simple rhetoric. Cuba has continued to work to make progress in implementing the Convention in the Paris Agreement and in strengthening its national contribution. Sadly, the slowness of international negotiations as well as uncertainties with regards to climate finances do not generate sufficient trust for the implementation of adaptation and mitigation measures to happen. We are told that the Loss and Damage Fund won't be available until 2026, and the negotiations of the new quantified goal have been hampered by intents to undermine the Paris Agreement basis. In Baku, we have a historic opportunity, namely to enable developing countries to balance their adaptation, mitigation, loss and damage policies, and to let down a pathway for a fair transition. We're in the implementation of the principle of common differentiated responsibilities will lead us to save our planet without anybody being left behind. Madam Chair, we hear the hackneyed argument that those who are responsible to provide the financing do not have enough resources in relation to the identified needs, which is why alternative sources need to be found, and the Paris Agreement is being reinterpreted with regards to contribution beneficiaries. At the same time, what is happening is that defense expenditure worldwide in 23 rose 9% and now reaches $2.2 trillion, and the US is at the forefront of this expenditure. We cannot remain passive whilst death is given priority over life. We demand that our counterparts in the developing countries shoulder their responsibilities. They need to show leadership in their efforts to provide mitigation and provide financing. There are no strategies to elude responsibilities and to shift the burden onto the shoulders of the peoples who are fighting to eradicate structural poverty and to achieve development which is dignified and sustainable for its people. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And it is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. Emílio Ferreira dos Santos Sousa, Deputy Minister for Environment of Portugal. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Senhora Presidente.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Portugal's goals for COP29 are aligned with the European Union priorities. We hope to see increased the efforts made by countries to meet the Paris Agreement and limit the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade. For this, it is essential to raise ambition regarding the new collective quantified goal for climate finance, which is set at $100 billion per year. At the same time, it is of utmost importance to broaden the donor base. We advocate that those who contribute to financing should not only be the developed countries, but also those that, while still considered developing countries, have high gross domestic products and high capita emissions levels. Currently, many of the world's largest polluters are not doing enough to fight against climate change. The European Union has led this effort and will continue to do so. But we need everyone and everyone's efforts Another goal of Portugal is that public financing, which constitutes a central component, can be complemented with more private investment. By 2030, Portugal's international climate finance commitments will total 68.5 million euros. Part of this amount is dedicated to the reconversion of the debt swap of Cape Verde and São Tomé and Príncipe into climate investment. Portugal aims to expand these partnerships, especially with the community of Portuguese-speaking countries after 2025. We hope this approach can inspire similar solutions worldwide. We also hope that this COP29 will result in strengthened adaptation measures to climate change, as well as the creation of conditions to ensure a just transition. With everyone being brought to account, with everybody's accountability, ambitious goals and flexibility in solutions will be closer to our objectives. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Mike Elton Mposha, Minister of Green Economy and Environment of Zambia. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates. From the outset, I wish to convey my gratitude to the government and the good people of Azerbaijan for the warm hospitality accorded to me and my delegation since our arrival here. Madam President, Zambia is currently facing one of the worst impacts of climate change arising from the most severe drought the country has seen in over 40 years, which has affected food, energy and water security and the livelihoods of millions of our people. Our agricultural production was slashed by more than half, while our hydropower generation has almost been wiped out due to inadequate water levels. The destruction caused by the severe drought has affected 84 out of our 116 districts in the country and 9.8 million out of 20 million people, with 6.6 million needing immediately humanitarian assistance. These impacts have resulted in a steep decline in our economic growth prospects, as the affected sectors are the key drivers of our economic activities. Madam President, with this background, Zambia demands that we do not leave this conference without achieving the following. 1, a new collective quantified goal on finance that has strong linkages between the severity of the impacts and identified financing needs of developing countries to fight climate change. Number 2, advance our work on the global goal on adaptation to ensure that we will be able to adopt indicators next year in Brazil. The third point is finalize the rules and modalities for the carbon market under the Paris Agreement to ensure that it delivers on enhanced ambition while supporting sustainable development in host countries. And the fourth point, we call upon the board of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage to accelerate progress towards the full operationalization and capitalization of the fund to make it functional and ensure access and timely delivery of funds to the affected countries. Madam President, as I conclude, I wish to remind us that we only have one earth. We are one family and share one future. Together, we must act now, as our actions today will define the future. of our planet. Zambia is ready to collaborate with all nations in this endeavor. Madam President, I wish COP29 all the best of success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And it is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. Max Andonirina Fontaine, Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of Madagascar. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président,
Chair, Secretary General, Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Madagascar, Andry Rajoelina, and the government headed up by Prime Minister Christian Nsai, allow me to address you in the name of Madagascar. I align with the previous speakers in conveying our sincere thanks to the host country, Azerbaijan, for its marvelous hospitality and its outstanding efforts in chairing this COP. Excellencies, Madagascar is a bulwark against global climate storms. It sequesters carbon, protects its exceptional biodiversity, and acts as a shield against climate imbalances and climate change. But this bulwark is damaged by repeated disasters, cyclones, droughts, flooding. Each year these destroy our cities, our farmland and infrastructure, costing more than 4% of our GDP. An unsustainable burden for a nation which has only contributed 0.08% of global emissions. However, Madagascar refuses to crumble under the weight of these challenges. We have chosen to face them with determination. Under the vision of President Rajoelina, our general government policy places the fight against climate change at the top of our list of priorities, and Madagascar as a country of solutions and action. Adaptation and loss and damages have become a daily reality and a matter of the utmost urgency. Our communities must be better prepared to tackle increasingly frequent disasters. Mitigation based on our role as a carbon sink will entail sustainable management of our natural resources, the mainstay of development in our country. Madagascar is proud to be a founding member of the G0 coalition announced at COP29, an alliance of carbon-negative countries based on a simple but powerful principle: sequestering more carbon than they emit. I would like to recall a fundamental truth stated emphatically by the United Nations Secretary General. Financing for the fight against climate change is not charity, it is an investment. Climate action is not an option, it is an imperative. Madagascar is turning this vision into concrete action. Since COP28 at Dubai, we have taken key steps, such as the implementation of RSF reform programs based on sustainability with the support of the IMF and the World Bank. This made Madagascar the first country in the world to enjoy an enhanced climate collaboration framework. Our first green bond of $35 million was issued in partnership with the private sector, and we also have active cooperation with the GEF, the IMF and the World Bank to structure a new bond, the Lemma bond, intended to preserve our unique biodiversity. However, these efforts will not be sufficient to maintain the bulwark. Madagascar calls for the immediate operationalization of the Loss and Damages Fund starting in 2025 with streamlined access for vulnerable countries. This fund is not a luxury, it is not a favor, but it is common responsibility according to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. We also stress the importance of additional predictable financing aligned above all with the needs of developing countries, in keeping with the principles of the Convention and the Paris Agreement. These funds must support the implementation of our national adaptation plans, because each dollar invested today saves us billions of damage tomorrow. Finally, Madagascar welcomes progress in clarifying market mechanisms under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Excellencies, this bulwark that is Madagascar cannot last forever. If it falls, it will not be only our country that collapses, but also part of our planet's balance. History will remember one of two things about us: either that we dared to change the course of our destiny here, or that we signed the death warrant of millions of people. Madagascar chooses the first option and urges everyone in this room to do likewise. The future is watching us. Thank you.
Merci, Votre Excellence.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
And it is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. Kaspars Maunis, Minister of Energy and Climate of Latvia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates and guests of COP29. Let me thank the COP presidency for hosting this important event and facilitating the process for a good outcome. During the past week, we have heard much about the urgent need of accelerate climate actions. And today, from the previous speech, delegates, we all share responsibility. Latvia is a small country, but yes, we are committed to do our part too. This year, Latvia had the honor of hosting the IPCC first scoping meeting of climate change in cities. We believe that IPCC reports are of key importance, and it's crucial that the next IPCC assessment cycle reports are published well before the second global stock of 2028. We are actively updating and advancing Latvian climate policy and legal framework to ensure we stay on track toward climate neutrality. Latvia is committed to submitting our biannual transparency report on time. COP29 has a task, I would say even obligations, to meet the expectations of our citizens. It must deliver increased efforts of mitigation, adaptation and resilience. And it is important to support these efforts also financially, especially small islands and landlocked developing countries. Latvia has been committed to the successful outcomes of UN Sites 4 and LLDC-3 conference, including financially supporting advancing the multidimensional vulnerable index to increase the resilience of the most of climate-affected nations. Latvia also has contributed to the United Nations Central Emergency Response Fund and the United Nations Loss and Damage Fund. But these are challenging times. Current Europe is facing the war of aggression started by the Russian Federation in Ukraine. This provoked an illegal aggression that condemns in the strongest terms, not only undermines the United Nations Charter, but also does ecological damage and harms Ukraine to efforts to address climate change. Ukraine deserves our solidarity and support. Latvia stands ready to further advance the action-oriented deliberation of the nexus of climate and security as a candidate of an elected seat of the United Nations Security Council 2026-2027. Finally, dear colleagues, it is nice to discuss, but it is more important to act. This is about a respectful attitude to our planet. We have only one planet. We don't have borders for climate change. This is about the future of our children. We can and we must deliver balance and activity-driven outcome to COP29. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And it is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Miriam Dalli, Minister for the Environment, Energy and Regeneration of the Grand Harbour of Malta. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, Madam President, allow me to start by thanking first and foremost the Azeri Presidency in bringing us together for this vital gathering. A successful COP29 depends upon tenacious leadership to seize the opportunities that decarbonisation through a just transition offers our nations, our people and our future generations. But there is also a COP29 to-do list we must implement to ensure positive change. First, our national determined contributions must be fit for purpose to keep the 1.5 degrees goal within reach, to stand a chance in adapting to the challenges of climate change. The link between robust mitigation and effective adaptation is inseparable. Malta's experience shows that our adaptation plans need to be part of our mitigation strategies to ensure preparedness and also resilience. Second, we must ensure a climate-neutral and resilient global future for our people and the planet through an ambitious and achievable agreement on the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. In this regard, Malta calls for a wide donor base that reflects the evolution of greenhouse gas contributions. Third, private investment is crucial to scale up finance required for the green transition, and Malta supports a multi-layered model where the NCQG is primarily accessible to the most vulnerable, such as small island states and the least developing countries. And Malta is proud to contribute through the development of the Climate Vulnerability and Resilience Index and to share its experience with microfinancing as an indispensable tool for tapping adequate funding. Our achievements during COP29 must translate into qualitative, equitable and inclusive green transition back at home. Such an approach requires both synergy and also transparency. Malta took an innovative step in domestic climate governance by establishing the Climate Action Authority to steer a cross-sectoral coordinated approach towards climate neutrality. Each single step is pivotal to reach the desired destination, and it is up to us to transform COP29 into a milestone on the pathway to climate neutrality, an aim which is essential to guarantee global peace and security. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And it is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. Hassan Bakir Jamous, Minister of Environment, Fisheries and Sustainable Development of Chad. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam. Excellencies, Your Excellency President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, President of the 29th Conference of the Parties, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. At the very outset, allow me to convey the warmest greetings of His Excellency, Mr. Mohamed Idris Deby Itno, President of the Republic of Chad and Head of State, who, due to urgent commitments, was not able to be present at this Climate Leaders Summit. It is my honor to address you on his behalf to convey the respectful greetings of the government and people of Chad, who are following with special interest the crucial discussions at this summit. On behalf of His Excellency, Mr. Mohamed Idris Deby Itno, President of the Republic of Chad, I would like to present his statement, and I quote, "Allow me at the outset to thank the government and people of the Republic of Azerbaijan for all of the hospitality that we have enjoyed in Baku. We also welcome the fact that in organizing COP29, His Excellency Ilham Aliyev, President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, is continuing to honor the decisive commitment to a sustainable and prosperous future. We thank him for his distinguished efforts. In addition, I would like to express my deep gratitude to Mr. Simon Steele, Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, and all of his team for the work that they have done. By participating in COP29, my country, Chad, attaches great importance to environmental protection of a planet which is suffering the harmful effects of climate change. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to share with you the climate reality experienced by my country, Chad. Like many nations facing climate vulnerability, Chad is on the front line of this global crisis, fully exposed to the devastating impacts of climate change. The year 2024 will remain etched in our collective memory as one of unprecedented disasters. Waves of floods ravaged 119 of our 125 departments, impacting more than 1.9 million of our fellow citizens. That is more than 10% of our population. The staggering losses are quite clear. More than 217,000 homes destroyed, 432 hectares of agricultural land destroyed, 72,000 livestock destroyed, and tragically we lost 576 human lives. These figures, although they may be statistics, they reflect human and environmental tragedies of unprecedented intensity. They represent damaged ecosystems, damaged homes, and shattered livelihoods. Chad's situation is ever more complex, given that we are sorely tested by our geopolitical position and the security challenges that we face. Chad is at the crossroads of many regional crises. In the east, there's the Sudan crisis, leading to a large arrival of refugees, which exerts additional pressure on our already scarce resources. The continued instability in Libya continues to sorely test our national security. In the Lake Chad region, the threat of Boko Haram remains in place, forcing the displacement of entire communities. This brings together climate vulnerability and security fragility, which highlights the indissociable link between climate, security, and development. It is in this context that we welcome the Declaration on Climate, Peace, Stability, and Reconstruction ratified at COP28. We call on the international community to swiftly turn this declaration into action. Fragile states such as ours cannot wait any longer. Therefore, at this rostrum, we call for the creation of a special financing mechanism dedicated to fragile countries facing conflict, and the systematic integration of fragility and conflict into all financing mechanisms for climate. Excellencies, the creation of the Loss and Damages Fund at COP28 was a major step forwards. But the urgent needs of our time call for swift implementation. My country calls for simplified access mechanisms for the most vulnerable countries, a minimum allocation that is guaranteed for LDCs, modalities for rapid disbursement for emergency situations, and the inclusion of a sub-goal dedicated to loss and damage in the NCQG. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of climate ambition, Chad has already sketched the outlines of its commitment to fighting climate change. As of 2017, we drew up our first NDC, which was ambitiously revised in 2021 in full compliance with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. The implementation of these instruments will require very large-scale investment, estimated at $11.7 billion. This financing need is largely unmet, which seriously restricts our ability to protect our communities who are among the most vulnerable today. This is why we believe that the COP29 summit, which is focused on climate financing, is a crucial moment in rebuilding the international financial architecture. In this momentum, I reiterate Chad's support for the common positions of the groups that we belong to in the negotiations. These are the African Group, LDCs, and the G77 plus China. It would be remiss of me to conclude without reiterating a call for saving Lake Chad. Its basin is home to more than 30 million people, and it is threatened with total disappearance. This COP, the COP of Finance, is something that we would like not to be just another meeting, but something that meets the shared ambitions of humanity. Thank you very much.
Merci, Votre Excellence.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
It is my pleasure now to welcome Her Excellency, Ms. Rohi John, Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources of the Gambia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of His Excellency Mr. Adama Barrow, President of the Republic of the Gambia, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate His Excellency President of the Republic of Azerbaijan for the successful hosting of COP29 and also the warm welcome. It is an honor to address this crucial forum of this COP29 on behalf of the Gambia, a nation that, like many climate-vulnerable, least developed countries, is facing the harsh and escalating impact of climate change. The 1.5 degrees Celsius limit of the Paris Agreement becomes ever more critical as many climate-vulnerable countries have already warmed to mean temperatures, affecting the optimal growth of our economy. The Gambia stands on the front line of this global crisis, committed to making significant strides in our action towards the climate change, as indicated in our NDCs. However, we are constrained by the lack of adequate climate finance, just like many other least developed countries. It is imperative that developed nations fulfill their existing climate finance commitments. The new collective quantified goals represent a pivotal opportunity to correct past shortcomings of the $100 billion climate targets. We therefore call for COP29 to agree on a core science-based public climate finance goal that reflects our evolving needs and priorities. The NCQG must be ambitious, trackable, and actionable, with a focus on funding that enhances resilience and drives transformative change in line with the Paris Agreement 1.5 degree temperature reduction targets. The NCQG must directly connect with ongoing reforms to facilitate effective resource mobilizations, enhance accountability in the international financial system, and address cost of capital, debt instability, and loss and damage comprehensively. Specifically, to incentivize low cost capital to the NCQG must stipulate the financial counting towards the goal must be differentiated based on its cost, such as on the grant equivalent basis, avoiding the 100 million target floor as counting all loans and grants equally. Let me stress here that loss and damage must become an integral part of the climate finance conversation. Building social safety net is critical to reach the most vulnerable population. With dedicated resources to help countries recover from irreversible loss, that's the impact of climate change, and guaranteeing the attainment of our SDGs. The Gambia is actively doing its best in mobilizing resources to turn our climate commitments into actions. However, to effectively deliver on the ambitious goals laid in our NDCs, we urgently need $268 million in conditional support. This funding is essential right now to implement the adaptation and mitigation efforts that will protect our communities and secure a prosperous future for generations to come. As we are wrapping with COP29 and looking forward to the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development in June 25, We seek the active support of the international community to expedite the key decisions on the international financial architecture reform agenda. It is important to emphasize that mere pledges of financing support are insufficient. We need the climate funds to be harmonized and streamlined to ensure vulnerable countries can maximize access to climate finance to address the growing adaptation financial gap. As vulnerable nations, we stand united in solidarity, committed to supporting each other in building a sustainable and prosperous future. For the Gambia, this means we urgently need a doubling of concessionary financing and resources to drive the structural transformations necessary for our economy. Only with this enhanced support we can foster resilience, sustainable growth, and equitable progress for our planet and the people. We call on all developed nations, multilateral institutions, and private sectors to step up their financial commitments, streamline access to finance, and explore innovative financial solutions. Let us move from promises to practice, ensure that no country is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure now to welcome His Excellency Mr. José Alejandro Lorca, Minister of Popular Power for Eco-Socialism of Venezuela. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Distinguished delegates, distinguished representatives of the various international organizations here and everyone else listening here. I bring to you the cordial and kindred greetings of the President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros. It's an honor for me to be here in this beautiful and vibrant town of Baku and to be involved in this emblematic climate conference summit. I would like to express my most heartfelt thanks to the government of Azerbaijan for the warm hospitality we have received and for having volunteered to host this COP, the significant COP. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we face the greatest climate crisis of our era, and despite the fact that we know that we have the enormous responsibility as a generation to slow it down, the efforts we have made have not been enough. The natural disasters have increased. Sea levels continue to rise, temperatures and acidity of oceans continue to rise at an alarming rate, and however we cannot admit defeat. We must speed up what we do to preserve life. In the words of our President, and I quote, "Humanity must unite in a common effort to save the planet. There is no plan B because there is no planet B," which is why we need political will of all countries. We need to work together to implement the Convention and the Paris Agreement without rewriting it, nor them or reinterpreting them. We must base ourselves on the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities and respected capabilities, especially focusing on implementation. Madam President, it is crucial that we resolutely move towards a new an NCQG with the support of developed countries, with predictable financing, as well as transfer of technology and capacity building, which need to be sufficient, gradual and accessible. This is crucial if we want to achieve adaptation and mitigation and avoid loss and damage. Furthermore, we must end unlawful and criminal unilateral coercive measures, UCMs. My country is being subjected to them now, today, and these have been imposed upon us by the United States of America and the EU. These measures violate international and environmental law and restrict the right of our people to sustainable development. Despite these challenges, Venezuela has achieved significant progress in combating the climate crisis, and we are more committed than ever today. And today we're submitting our first national communication, our third national communication, our first biannual transparency report, and our first GHG inventory, which show the world that we are a carbon-neutral country, and we only emit 0.39% of global emissions. and that we remove more emissions than we emit, given how diverse we are. At the same time, we're aware of the importance of continuing to work, and we're aware of our contribution for the work. And to do that, we implement policies for the welfare of future and present generations, including the fact that we protect more than 53% of our national territory, the fact that we have more than 50,000 young people involved in something we called the National Climate Empowerment Plan. We have 3,641 technical teams for recycling and sanitation, which strengthens our circular economy. 80% of our energy mix is renewable, and we have delivered to date over 5 million homes to our people as an adaptation measure. We are a developing country which has responsibly and tirelessly worked to combat climate change, which is why this COP, called the financing COP on financing, is called upon to, developed countries are called upon to walk their talk. I would like to conclude by reiterating the unshakable commitment to Mother Earth and the future generations. We in Venezuela will continue to fight for a world that is fairer, more sustainable, and in harmony with nature. If we unite, we will conquer, and we will do so for the welfare of our planet and of all of humanity. We will only succeed if we are united.
Muchas gracias, Su Excelencia.
Thank you very much, Excellency.
It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency, Mrs. Amna bint Abdullah Al-Dahak Al-Shamsi, Minister of Climate Change and Environment of the United Arab Emirates. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
أصحاب المعالي، الوفود الكرام، السيدات والسادة، تحية لكم.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to greet you from the UAE, the host of the previous COP, COP29. We were very proud to hand over the presidency of COP to Azerbaijan, where we have been so very welcomed and hosted in order to speed up climate action, which is quite fruitful and impactful. In the UAE, His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, the head of the UAE, has declared 2024 a sustainable year successively after last year's sustainable year. And we have pledged that COP would be the most comprehensive COP. And indeed, we had the first GST taking place in COP in order to evaluate the goals of the Paris Agreement. The historic UAE consensus reflects consensus of the international efforts to combat and address climate challenges. That consensus was signed upon by 198 countries, and they have agreed on a road plan for just transition in the climate field. We have also pledged more than $850 million to the Fund for Loss and Damages. 18 pledges and $85 million were also pledged to finance climate action. We are still building on the successes of COP28 through various strategic steps that create opportunities for technology, creativity, and partnerships. In this year, the UAE has adopted the Mohammed bin Zayed Water Initiative, following COP28 pledges to provide $150 million to accelerate creative solutions for water scarcity. We look forward to co-hosting the UN Water Conference in 2026 in cooperation with Senegal in order to accelerate the implementation of Objective Goal or Goal 6 of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we call upon you to actively participate in the preparation phase for that conference. We have also committed ourselves to the troika of the presidents of COP28, 29, and 30 in cooperation with Azerbaijan and Brazil to accelerate global transition and to stress and underline climate action. Towards the beginning of this year, we succeeded to cooperate with the UNE and Panama to announce the World Renewable Energy Day as part of our strategy for carbon neutrality by 2050. We have pledged to double our efforts or to triple our efforts towards renewable energy by 2030. And our strategy for 2050 aims at availing $55 million by 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, technology is the main buttress for acceleration of climate action, and the UAE has achieved an excellent technological achievement in 2024 by using green hydrogen to produce iron and steel. The Abu Dhabi renewable energy company Masdar and the Emirat Iron Company have announced the success of their pilot project in this respect. And as part of our 2050 hydrogen strategy, aims at making UAE a main producer of low-emission hydrogen by 2031. International cooperation has a deep impact to achieve our common goals when it comes to international climate action. And we aim at implementing the new quantitative goal in order to avail accessible and affordable climate financing to the global south and to implement Article 6 of Paris Agreement. We commit to the various aims of this COP: mitigation, adaptation, losses, just transition, water, technology, involvement of women and the youth. Climate action is indeed an opportunity, and we are sure that the presidency of COP29 would lead to a more sustainable future for us and for the future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Carlos James, Minister of Tourism, Civil Aviation, Sustainable Development and Culture of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, recognizing our ecological fragility as a small island developing state, St. Vincent and the Grenadines cannot afford to be a mere spectator on the important issue of climate change. It is against this backdrop that I stand here with the available science and our very own real-life experiences of being on the front line of the devastating impacts of climate change. For St. Vincent and the Grenadines, reducing carbon emissions to 1.5 degrees Celsius is more than just a target. Mr. President, on the 1st of July 2024, our multi-island state was ravaged by the passage of the Category 4 Hurricane Beryl, leaving some of our islands unrecognizable, with thousands of families homeless in the wake of its destruction. We thank those who supported and continue to support our recovery efforts. As I deliver this statement, my people are waking up to the ravaging effects of severe flooding that is currently affecting our island's infrastructure. If we are to follow the science, the aggressive nature and the unpredictability of present weather systems is the climate's response to humanity's failure to act. For SIDS, we simply do not have any more time for a polite ask. We cannot continue to expend finite resources on a continuous recovery cycle while chasing vague promises for minuscule and indifferent action. Mr. President, as our nation actively undertakes recovery efforts, COP29 is flagged as the finance COP, and this has an even greater personal and national significance to us. Amidst the colorful diplomatic language of some leaders on this platform, our climate negotiators are disgracefully being held in a metaphoric chokehold as a major historic and contemporary carbon emitters bob and weave their way out of the commitments to reduce carbon emissions and bail out on climate finance pledges. This is a selfish and unwarranted assault on the 65 million people living in SIDS. We need to ensure that at this COP, the new collective quantified goal will build upon previous climate finance targets. Mr. President, the new goal must take into account and respond to the urgent needs and priorities of developing countries and recognition of the special circumstances of SIDS, addressing efficaciously their unique social, economic, and environmental vulnerabilities. Collectively, we must find solutions to unlocking the ever-complicated maze of climate finance, with practical considerations for access and distribution, while renewing the call for a restructure of the global financial architecture presently designed to keep SIDS in a vicious cycle of debt. Our government firmly advocates for effective multilateralism and an international framework within which our developed priorities can be pursued. In this vein, we highlight that all countries, especially those most affected, such as Taiwan, should have a seat at the negotiating table. Mr. President, we need an unprecedented level of collective action. In the final days of this conference, we must not compromise ourselves out of a viable future. Ambitious actions is not a want, but an imperative as we keep our heads above the rising tide to safeguard lives and livelihoods. Finally, Mr. President, there is still some lingering hope in humanity's call to action. Despite the challenges, it can and must be done. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Kirti Vardhan Singh, Minister of State for Environment, Forests and Climate Change of India. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I thank the government of Azerbaijan and the people of Azerbaijan for hosting us in this historical and beautiful city of Baku. Excellencies, today we are at a very important juncture of our collective fight against climate change. What we decide here will enable all of us, particularly those in the global south, to not only take ambitious mitigation actions, but also adapt to the climate change. Excellencies, our decisions on this forum should be guided by the core principles of equity, climate justice, and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, as provided in the UNFCCC and its Paris Agreement. The context of different national circumstances, sustainable development goals, and poverty eradication, particularly in respect of the global south, should not be lost sight of. The high carbon emission development pathways of the global north in the past have left very little carbon space for the global south. However, our growth trajectories for fulfilling the primary needs of sustainable development and poverty eradication cannot be compromised. Despite not contributing to the problem, we in the global south are bearing huge financial burden on account of climate actions for mitigation on one hand, and losses and damages caused by climate change on the other, thus severely limiting our capacity to meet our developmental needs. But Excellencies, these have not dampened India's resolve and commitment to take ambitious climate actions. We achieved our 2015 NDC targets on emission intensity reduction and non-fossil based installed electricity generation capacity much earlier than 2030 and have further enhanced our ambitions in these sectors. India's renewable energy capacity has nearly tripled from its 2014 levels, and we are on course to achieve the 500 gigawatt target by 2030. India has launched the Mission Life, which is Lifestyle for Environment, to encourage the sustainable lifestyle practices at the global level. Mission Life inspires individuals, communities, and societies to exercise choices and behaviors that focus on mindful utilization of resources. We are at the forefront of pro-planet actions. The campaign Ek Peड़ Maa Ke Naam, launched by Honorable Prime Minister on World Environment Day in June this year, has resulted in 1 billion saplings being planted since then. Plant for Mother, which urges everyone to plant a tree as a mark of love and respect for our Mother and Mother Earth, has resonated across the spectrum with its powerful, inspirational, and emotional connect. Furthermore, International Solar Alliance, Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure, Global Biofuel Alliance, Resource Efficiency and Circular Economy Industry Coalition, Leadership Group on Industry Transition have been launched by India with different partner countries in pursuit of global climate actions. Excellencies, raising of climate ambitions to align with Paris temperature goals has to be preceded by the free availability of green technologies, producing them on scale, and the availability of finance for their deployment, particularly in the Global South. On the contrary, some of the developed countries have resorted to unilateral measures, making climate actions more difficult for the Global South. The emergency situation we are in, there is no option but to break all barriers to flow of technology, finances, and capacity to the developing countries. The theme of this COP, enabling actions and enhanced ambition, is very relevant in this context. COP29 is the COP for climate finance. The new collective quantified goals on climate finance for mobilizing climate finance to meet the needs and the priorities of the developing countries. We all need to appreciate that huge costs are being imposed on a developing country like ours for undertaking our climate actions. What we decide here on NCQG must be founded on the principle of climate justice. The decisions must be ambitious and unambiguous, taking into consideration the evolving needs and the priorities of the developing countries and the commitment to sustainable development and eradication of poverty. Excellencies, the next round of nationally determined contributions are due for submission the next year. The breach of carbon space seems imminent towards the end of this critical decade. It is imperative, therefore, that the developed countries show leadership in mitigation actions as required under the Paris Agreement by not just advancing their net zero targets, but also providing enough carbon space for the developing countries like ours to develop. Excellencies, I urge that all of us should work with determination towards making COP29 meaningful and impactful in its outcomes. Excellencies, please be assured of India's full cooperation for a successful COP29. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Luay Karita, Minister of Local Administration and Environment of the Syrian Arab Republic. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
السادة أصحاب المعالي ورؤساء الوفود.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen,
بمناسبة انعقاد مؤتمر الأطراف,
representatives of international organizations, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Syrian Arab Republic, allow me to express my sincere congratulations to the government of Azerbaijan for organizing COP29. I would also like to thank the Secretariat of the UNFCCC for the warm welcome and the excellent organization. Syria reaffirms its commitment to global efforts to tackle climate change and to mitigate its impacts, while underscoring the need to set up the Loss and Damages Fund and to abide by obligations to developing countries to provide the necessary resources, taking into account the needs and priorities of developing countries, including Syria. Regarding Syria specifically, it is suffering the impacts of climate change on the economy and society too. These impacts take the form of decreased rainfall, increased dust storms, desertification and drought. On top of this, we have the impact of terrorist acts also affecting the environment in Syria, leading to a significant increase in atmospheric pollution, inter alia due to destruction of oil infrastructure and artisanal refining installations and petrol leaks in illegally occupied areas, illegally occupied by Western countries. These actions also lead to soil pollution, destruction of natural habitats, and the loss of many aquatic and land species, and forest fires. The Turkish occupation also continues to impact drinking water, including in the Euphrates, negatively impacting agriculture and biodiversity. There is also the aggravation of the situation regarding waste. In addition, we have economic sanctions, UCMs, imposed on the Syrian people, exacerbating the impacts of climate change and the delivery of much-needed materials and access to the necessary funds to tackle climate change. We, therefore, are not able to import necessary equipment, and we cannot access financing through international transactions. In spite of all of this and the impact of terrorism, the occupation and UCMs imposed on our country, Syria has continued its efforts to protect the environment, including the environmental dimension in its development and recovery plans. Syria also continues to abide by international agreements that it is party to. For instance, we have updated our NDC as part of our National Climate Change Program. We have also set up a fund to mitigate the impacts of drought and natural disasters. By way of conclusion, I would like to thank everyone who participated in the preparations for this very important conference. We thank the government of Azerbaijan and also those in the UNFCCC Secretariat who contributed. I would like to reiterate the importance for developed countries and banking institutions and all of those providing technical and other assistance to abide by their technical and financial commitments to protect human life against climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Beatrice Anwar, Minister of State for Environment of Uganda. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A statement by His Excellency General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, the President of the Republic of Uganda. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to congratulate His Excellency Ilham Aliyev, the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, and the co-president, His Excellency Mutka Babayo, for his excellent leadership in this COP29. Uganda supports the COP29 President's stand of leaving no one behind. With regard to climate ambition and climate action, Uganda affirms her support to the COP29 President's vision, fixed priority, dual pillar plan that is based on enhancing ambition and enabling action. In line with the first pillar of enhancing ambition, Uganda, despite being a relatively low contributor to the global greenhouse gas emissions, commits to updating her national determined contribution in 2025. In line with the second pillar, Uganda, like many developing countries, relies on the support from developed countries to implement a substantial proportion of her climate action commitments. It is against this background that Uganda calls for a further commitment of financial, technical, and capacity building support while ensuring simplified and direct access to those funds by the vulnerable countries that often have limited capacity to follow complex access modalities. Recognizing that climate finance is a key enabler of climate action, especially in developing countries, Uganda looks up to COP29, setting a new collective quantified goal on climate finance that takes into consideration the unique circumstances of the least developing countries and small island developing states in dealing with disproportionate impacts, loss and damage that these countries have to continually suffer in the face of climate variability and climate change. Uganda is optimistic that COP29 will expedite the approval of the operational modalities for the Fund of Addressing Loss and Damage due to the climate impacts to enable vulnerable communities to access these much needed funds as soon as possible. In conclusion, I would like to inform you that Uganda wishes to draw the attention of the COP29 to the growing problem of climate-induced migration in Africa. The number of affected people, particularly women and children, who are displaced within and across national borders is consistently on the rise with devastating consequences. Uganda offers the Kampala Ministerial Declaration on Migration, Environment and Climate Change Africa, a regional framework for addressing this evolving concern. Uganda welcomes global partners and friends to join hands to advance the implementation of this framework for the benefit of the people affected by climate-induced migration. I want to thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now it's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Dion Travers George, Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment of South Africa. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, climate change impacts are now visible globally, particularly affecting developing economy nations and deepening existing inequalities. For developing economies, COP29 presents a vital opportunity to establish institutional infrastructure supporting ambitious climate action, while addressing hurdles to sustainable development. These two objectives are inseparable. Climate change threatens to derail development progress, while failures to decarbonize risks economic marginalization nationally and disaster globally. Achieving these goals requires resources beyond our domestic capabilities. The new collective quantified goal, NCQG, on climate finance must deliver trillions of dollars annually. This support must avoid deepening the fiscal burdens on developing economy nations, particularly those struggling with debt, and should be accompanied by reforms to the global financial system, including multilateral development banks. In South Africa's context, adaptation remains our primary climate response priority. We support the UAE framework for global climate resilience and call for progress on adaptation indicators at COP29. Regarding mitigation, South Africa's NDC target represents an ambitious contribution considering our circumstances. We are implementing policies to achieve our 2025 and 2030 targets while addressing poverty, inequality and unemployment. We will submit our first biennial transparency report this year, reporting on our NDCs, and are developing our second NDC with consideration of the first global stocktake outcome. South Africa needs financial and non-financial support to ensure an inclusive and equitable transition that benefits all sectors, including SMMEs. We support the inclusive transition approach agreed to at COP28, recognizing that just transition encompasses both mitigation and adaptation and require substantial international cooperation. The just transition also depends on developing economy countries, on our ability to access international markets. Unilateral trade measures which aim to achieve unbalanced climate objectives outside of the framework of the multilateral process or unfairly restrict global trade in green technology will only serve to hinder our ability to achieve a just transition and slow the global effort to address climate change. We urge developed economy countries to fulfill their commitments, including the $100 billion per annum climate finance target through 2025, to rebuild trust as we work on the post-2025 NCQG. Let COP29 mark the turning point for redefining the global financial architecture to make it fit for purpose, for climate change and for sustainable development, and ensuring international financial institutions address the reality of achieving sustainable development, creating an equitable and resilient future for all nations. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. A continuación, tengo el placer de dar...
It's a pleasure now to give the floor to Susana Mohammed Gonzalez, Her Excellency, Minister of the Environment and Sustainable Development of Colombia. Excellency, you have the floor.
We come to speak about finance in this climate COP. However, the deep discussion is about inequality. The climate transition is following the same market-based solutions and is increasing and reproducing dangerously the gap between the richest and the most vulnerable. The transition cannot follow the same rules created to develop the fossil fuel-based economy. We need to create a transition regime. As an example, Colombia's challenge is about replacing the income of its export of coal, oil and gas, which represents today 10% of GDP, but also a big portion of the fiscal income of the country. It is not about only the energy transition, it's a whole economic transition, and we haven't debated the economic consequences of moving out of the fossil fuel economy as a whole. At the same time, the country faces fiscal restraints due to the indebtedness that happened after COVID, and also low-risk investment and increased debt costs with access to capital at 10%. How are we going to make this whole of economy transition at the same time that we are today dealing with the effects of the climate crisis and we have to invest in the adaptation? How does the sum and the account add up with the current financial institutions where we have low investment access, high risk, and also high cost of capital, and at the same time, high debt? We cannot take more debt. Are we going to continue saying in these COPs that we're going to comply with the Paris Agreement, having the same financial architecture and the same financial conditions? If we're going to say so, we're not going to comply, and that's what exactly the IPCC is showing in its gap report. So what we expect from this COP is to make a first step. On the one hand, to comply with the Paris Agreement NCQG goal that provides a financial package from developed to developing countries that is substantial, that can be a leverage to mobilize resources at a higher scale. On a second scale, that from this COP, debt relief could be attained and called politically upon. And finally, that we can call on a financial pact for life that guarantees long-term, direct access of finance for the transition. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now, on behalf of the conference, I would like to thank you all for your statements. Distinguished delegates, we will continue with the delivery of a national statement tomorrow at 10 a.m. in this plenary. With this, I declare this joint meeting of the COP, CMP and the CMA adjourned.